The news of my brother's accident hit me like a punch to the gut. A minor car crash, the doctor said, a broken arm and some cuts and bruises. But still, the thought of him in pain, vulnerable, sent a wave of worry through me. I was due to leave for a month-long business trip the following week, and the timing couldn't have been worse. My wife, Sarah, was a stay-at-home mom, and I knew she would be more than capable of taking care of him. They were close, always exchanging jokes and stories, and I felt a sense of relief knowing he wouldn't be alone. The days leading up to my trip were a whirlwind of packing, last-minute meetings, and frantic goodbyes. Sarah assured me she would take good care of my brother, sending me regular updates and pictures of him grinning with a bandaged arm, looking more like a mischievous pirate than an injured victim. My work trip was demanding, but the thought of my family kept me going. Every evening, I would call Sarah, and she would tell me about my brother's progress, how he was healing well and keeping her entertained with his endless stories. I felt a pang of guilt for not being there, but knowing they were together, laughing and sharing meals, brought me comfort. With my work wrapping up earlier than expected, I decided to surprise Sarah and my brother. I booked an early flight, bought a bouquet of her favorite lilies, and picked up a thoughtful gift for my brother. The thought of seeing their faces light up filled me with anticipation. As I approached my house, a wave of excitement washed over me. I fumbled with my keys, eager to get inside and share the news. The door creaked open, and I stepped into the familiar hallway, the scent of freshly baked cookies filling the air. Following the aroma, I walked towards the kitchen, a smile spreading across my face. But as I rounded the corner, my smile vanished, replaced by a sickening feeling of dread. There, in the middle of the kitchen, stood Sarah and my brother, locked in an embrace. Their clothes were disheveled, their faces flushed, and the air crackled with an undeniable intimacy. The scene before me was a betrayal so profound that it felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath my feet. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I was seeing, but the words refused to form. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in shock, but eventually, the instinct to escape took over. I turned on my heel and walked out of the house, the lilies falling from my grasp, scattering like fallen stars on the porch. I wandered aimlessly for hours, the pain of betrayal a constant companion. The image of their embrace replayed in my mind, each detail searing itself into my memory. The trust one had placed in them, the love I had shared with my wife, the bond one had with my brother, all of it shattered into a million pieces. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, I knew I couldn't avoid the situation any longer. I had to face them, to understand what had happened, to find a way to move forward, even if it meant walking away from everything I held dear. With a heavy heart, I returned home. The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. I found Sarah and my brother in the living room, their faces etched with a mixture of guilt and shame. The conversation that followed was painful, filled with accusations, tears, and apologies. Sarah confessed that their relationship had started innocently, a shared moment of weakness that had spiraled into something more. My brother, overcome with remorse, apologized for betraying my trust and for hurting me so deeply. The hours that followed were a blur of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal swirled within me. I couldn't understand how the people I loved the most could have done this to me. As the night wore on, exhaustion finally took over. I retreated to the guest room, unable to bear the thought of sharing a bed with my wife. The silence in the house was deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and warmth that had once filled it. The following days were a struggle. I tried to process what had happened, to find a way to forgive, but the pain was still raw, the wound still fresh. Sarah and my brother were apologetic, desperate to make amends, but their words felt hollow. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something that could be forced. It was a journey, a process that would take time and introspection. I started to see a therapist, to explore the depths of my emotions, to understand the root of my anger and hurt. Slowly, I began to let go of some of the bitterness. I realized that holding onto the pain was only poisoning my own soul. I started to see Sarah and my brother not as betrayers, but as human beings who had made a terrible mistake. The road to reconciliation was long and arduous, but with time, patience, and a lot of therapy, we started to rebuild our relationships. Sarah and I worked on our communication, on rebuilding trust, on rediscovering the love that had once bound us together. My brother and I found a new way to connect, a bond based on honesty and understanding. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the old wounds threatened to resurface. But we were determined to make it work, to salvage what was left of our family. Years later, I can say that the betrayal changed us all. It left scars, but it also made us stronger, more resilient, and more appreciative of the love we had found. We learned that forgiveness is not about condoning the actions of others, but about releasing ourselves from the burden of the past. It is about choosing to move forward, to embrace the future with an open heart, and to allow ourselves the possibility of happiness once more.